Hello, my name is Stephanie Etzbach-Dale, and I am a Unitarian Universalist minister and spiritual director, founder of Tending Spirit, with specialized training in spiritual psychology. I'm delighted to be sharing with you this presentation on sacred ground through the Tree of Life. By way of background, I was raised in an atheist and agnostic household, but over the years I developed a strong relationship with mystic traditions, particularly through Hebraic and Christian teachings. In recent years, I've been deepening my studies of Torah, have been learning Hebrew, and have been drawing great strength, insight, and inspiration from what is called Etz Chaim, the Jewish Tree of Life teachings that came to us as what we call Kabbalah, received teachings. Today, with deep thanks for my teachers, my rabbis, and mentors, I want to share with you a brief overview of what I found most meaningful in those teachings, and particularly as they relate to what we're all dealing with right now, which is social and political and environmental disruption, uncertainty, fear, isolation, and the complex urgencies that arise when we are forced to face our own mortality. So I offer this presentation with humility and with respect, not as an expert, but as a spiritual pilgrim, and with apologies to those who will note my limitations as someone not born of the Jewish tradition. So here's what I'll be sharing. In this presentation, I'll be sharing a bit of historical context, the Tree of Life basics, how and why I'm finding strength and inspiration through it in these tumultuous times, and why you might also. I'll be sharing some thoughts on God and some words on spiritual practice and a blessing. First, however, I would like to invite you into a brief grounding meditation and let you know that you can feel free to come back to it anytime again whenever you're feeling a little frazzled and needing to center yourself. So let's begin. If you find yourself a comfortable position, and just take 3 deep breaths, in through the nose and out through the mouth. In through the nose, out through the mouth, being attentive to the parts of your body that may feel constricted or tight. Breathing in again, push that tension out through your feet with an out breath, and imagine that you have roots anchored deep in the earth. Allow the earth to hold you and take from you that tension. The earth knows how to compost. Wiggle around a little bit, move your shoulders, move your spine a little bit until you've found that place of balance, allowing your spine to lengthen, feel your facial muscles relax, and everything else. Just allow it to settle into place. Now dig those roots a little bit deeper into the earth, down through the soil, past clay and rocks, past bones and the detritus of past seasons, down through layers of sediment. As your roots near the earth center, there is a sense of attraction to that heat and energy that is at the center of the earth. Draw up this energy through your roots. Draw it all the way up until it arrives at the soles of your feet, and allow it to pool there. Allow it to pool there for just a moment, and then let it enter. Let it rush through your feet and your ankles and up your legs and past your knees to the base of your spine, filling your body, filling your belly, moving to the left hip and the right hip, rising up through your core, pulsing at your heart center, rising to your right shoulder, your left shoulder, and then up through the third eye, the left brain, the right brain, rising up through the crown of your head, filling you, flowing up and out and around you like a fountain, like the branches of a willow, touching and returning to the earth that energy so it flows through you in a continuous cycle. Relish this sensation, this flow, the sensation of surrender, of being so well filled with every nutrient you could possibly need. A few more breaths. And now it's time to thank the earth and to thank your body for this gift which you can access at any time. Take your hands and just move them down your arms as a way to ground this experience. And so we return our attention to this presentation, and so we begin with historical context. So it is said that the Jewish people came into being over 3,800 years ago when a covenant was established between God and Abraham. It is Abraham's son, Jacob, who introduced the idea of sacred ground, of a physical place where one can feel holy presence and the sense of the nearness of heavenly realms. In 1000 before the Common Era, King David conquered the city of Jerusalem, making it the capital of the Jewish kingdom, which had previously been nomadic. His son Solomon built the first temple there 40 years later in the place that was already recognized as sacred ground, the place where it was believed that Jacob had his vision of a ladder ascending to the heavens and messengers of God traveling up and down the ladder. Solomon's temple became the center of physical activity of Jewish life and identity, the location of the Holy of Holies. Around 587 BCE, the temple was destroyed, and then it was rebuilt, only to be destroyed again in 70 Common Era. This last loss was a huge blow to the Jewish people. They no longer had access to their sacred ground. They were no longer able to fulfill the sacrificial commandments that were related to the temple and to its priests. And the big question at that time became how to faithfully fulfill the people's covenant with God without access to that sacred place. Well, in order for Judaism to survive, in order for the people to be able to continue to faithfully serve God, there had to be a radical rethinking, a radical transformation of Judaism. Rabbis began to engage in the arduous process of gathering and consolidating and interpreting and codifying Jewish teachings and ethics, creating new rituals and liturgies so that Judaism could become portable, so it didn't have to rely on a particular place. The temple rituals over time were re-envisioned in such a way that Jewish religious obligations could from then on be fulfilled in each person's home. The sacred space of the temple was replaced with the sacred space of the Sabbath table in each home, and it was replaced with the sacred space of the minds and the hearts of the righteous. This religious development has always intrigued me because I have often struggled with not being able to be where I wanted to be spiritually. It should be possible, I've always thought, especially while riding the gritty New York City subways or sitting in freeway traffic, it should be possible to connect with the beauty and the power of our religious identity, of our religious values and sources of strength and courage, with the experience of covenant and of holy presence and potential, no matter where we are. That does seem to be every spiritual pilgrim's goal. More on that later. In any case, in the years since that re-envisioning and restructuring, the Jewish people were dispersed to all countries and continents all over the centuries, facing and as a people surviving untold hardships and horrors in the diaspora. That said, in medieval Europe, there were brief, peaceful periods of time in which Jews and Christians and Muslims lived side by side, prospering through an exchange of goods and ideas. It was during one of those times in the 13th century in Italy that a book was published within the Jewish community said to have ancient origins and to hold mystic secrets. These secret teachings were expounded upon and carried to other countries, available only to serious scholars, which they considered to be married men over the age of 40. Only in recent years have these mystic teachings re-emerged and been translated and become available to the uninitiated, fascinated general public, to the great consternation of Orthodox communities. As with all or most mystic teachings, the teachings are cryptic. They're hard to understand. A lot of symbolism is used and meaning is embedded at many different levels. So depending on where you're at, you may just walk right past a really important thing, depending on where you're at. This is why only the initiated, why only mature men were permitted to study. So here is a rendition of what's called the Tree of Life. Now, at first glance, it doesn't look very much like a tree. This image is symbolic. It is a metaphor to help people make sense of life's complexity. It's a kind of map guiding spiritual pilgrims through their own individual inconsistencies and yearnings and through higher impulses towards awareness of that great mystery beyond all time and space, which is known as God, or Ein Sof is another name. So this tree structure that I'm showing you here is studded with little circles, sephirot, it's called. They're like chakras, representing divine qualities that are present within human beings. Superimposed on the human body, each sephirot is associated with a part of the body. The sephirot are distributed in what we can recognize as the roots, trunks, and branches, the most dense being the roots and the more ethereal being the branches. The basic physical aspects of our being are grounded in the roots, in what's called the kingdom, Malkut. A little higher up is where we find the ego at Yesod, our passions and intuitions at Netzach, and our ability to piece things together and to communicate at Hod, at the hip. And all the inherited and accumulated patterns of thoughts and feelings and actions are all kind of located in the lower belly, according to this map. When we as individuals are able to process and integrate all of this well enough, we begin to awaken into our own consciousness, our own sense of self, connecting with the heart, Tiferet, with individual will and a sense of truth and purpose. And this then calls us to balance our strength and discipline at Givura, at the shoulder, and with mercy and kindness at Chesed. The area connecting these three sephirot, the heart and the two shoulders, is called the chalice of the soul. And it's believed to be associated with the legends of the Holy Grail because it is so precious and hard to find and to feel like you've got a grip of. Hard to find in particular because according to this paradigm and contrary to popular legend, the chalice is not a physical object, but a balanced way of being in the world. Now, the branches of the tree, the upper part of the tree, is where faithful and fortunate spiritual seekers encounter surrender to mystery. At the third eye here, da'at, and the elevated qualities of wisdom and understanding, which are the left and the right part of the brain. And at the very pinnacle, at the very top of the tree, is the unitive consciousness, the enlightenment at Keter, which means crown. So when we've reached that part, we are wearing our crown. So the sephirot on one side of the tree are understood to represent contracting and physical qualities, while those on the other side represent expansive and energetic qualities. The constant tension between these two pillars is what gives life its dynamism. Because life is literally dependent on rhythms of contraction and expansion. Our lungs and our hearts and the seasons and everything comes and goes, contracts and expands. Without contraction and expansion, without that constant movement, there is no life. Now the sephirot on the central pillar represent a balance between these opposing forces. Balance is the ideal state, and the central pillar through the heart is universally recognized as the most direct path from the bottom, from the roots, up to the branches, to the crown. In meditation, when I've superimposed this tree onto my life and onto my body consciously, it's become possible for me to very quickly check in with myself, to locate and ease imbalances, and eventually to facilitate an ascension toward unitive consciousness. Can't say that I'm there yet, can't say that that's where I'm living from, but I at least am trying to move in that direction. That direction of unitive consciousness, Keter, the crown, the place from which all diversity is recognized as undergirded by unity. So this metaphor and roadmap has been helpful for me, especially with everything going on in the world these days, because my commitment is to try to live from that balanced central pillar, to try to live with personal integrity, live by my religious values, and not get so shaken by everything else that's going on. That commitment is being tested on a daily basis. When I get caught up in fear, for example, when I start slipping into judgment or anger to the point where I can't even be open to another person's perspective, or when I'm allowing others too much latitude, when I'm putting up with inappropriate or hurtful behavior because I'm so focused on wanting to be compassionate and merciful, this map can help get me back into balance with truth and values and integrity, back to the central pillar. Superimposing the tree over institutions and governments is also possible, and it can offer great insights. So, for example, from the beginning, this country has been heavily weighted on the left pillar, over-identified with heavy-handed Gevuric principles of strength and might. What we've been seeing these past decades through civil rights and other social reform movements is a rising of the Hasidic principles of mercy and compassion. And what we're seeing now, unfortunately, is a backlash against that. There is so much work to be done before we can get to this sacred place of balance, before we can transcend our imbalanced institutional history and allow wisdom to flower, our unitive consciousness. Whatever your response may be to everything I've shared, I do invite you to think about which part of the tree is your comfort zone, which is an area of weakness. How well balanced are you in these elements? Are you more disciplined or more compassionate? Are you prone to anger? Do you get lost in despair? How connected are you to your truth? How much are you influenced by others and by external events? Imagine as part of your daily meditations, your spine as the central pillar. Imagine being rooted like a tree, drawing up earth energy and creative potential. Imagine growing up and out of habits of thought and feeling and action that just keep you stuck and stunted. Imagine growing a solid core, being strong in your values and with bark thick enough to protect you as you move through the day. Imagine being tree confident. And then reach out your branches to the open sky. Send your life force and energy out to the leaves and let fruits form and grow. The fruits that are unique to you, to your life, to who you are, and what comes from your passions. Grow an abundance of fruit as only you can to attract and feed life. Start each day by imagining yourself as a tree. It's as simple as that. Try it, please, even if none of the other stuff I've said makes any sense to you. In Hebraic tradition, God has many names and attributes, and is so far beyond naming that many of these names are not even uttered or even fully written down. The O in God is often replaced with a dash, and even Hashem, one of the more often spoken names for God, is frequently written with just the first letter, Hey. The name for God that I learned most recently and that I want to share with you is Makom. Makom means place or spaciousness, and is often translated as omnipresence and used to convey something about God. Makom, as God, points to the expansive and mysterious sacred space in which the material world came to be and continues to come to be. As such, Makom points to the incredible diversity of experience in this world and the generative sacred space within each and every one of us. That space, in my experience, yearns for purpose. It yearns for meaning. It yearns for connection, for reassurance, for certainty, for answers. It is a space that urges the creation of something new and harmonious, the creation of central pillar beauty of music and art and poetry and peace and equity on earth. Since space, by its very nature, has the creative potential to hold something else, to hold something new. And since we exist in that space, taking up and offering space to one another, it behooves us to remember that that spaciousness, that creative potential, divine creative potential, is always within us. Through spiritual disciplines, we can learn to tap into it at any time, no matter where we are, connecting with larger identity and with more expansive perspectives and ways of being, which is just another way of saying God, Makom, is ever within and with us. Our lives are the only temple we really need. Our lives, growing in consciousness and balance, are sacred space, and they are how we fulfill covenant. We, in all of our complexity and diversity, are creative potential in the flesh, which means we can make it through this time of upheaval and uncertainty. We can journey through the valley of the shadow of coronavirus together. And right here and right now, no matter who or where we are, we can, if we choose to, we can face and deny and disempower the many-faced false gods of greed and corruption, otherwise known as white supremacy culture. I mentioned spiritual discipline. It's one thing to connect abstractly, intellectually with wisdom teachings. It's another to incorporate them into our own lives in ways that have integrity, that make sense for who we are, and that feel meaningful. So I offer these recommendations. If you can connect with the religious tradition of your heritage, do so by all means. Mine it for whatever truth and guidance it can offer you. Be a living testimony to its transformative potential. If not, and if you find yourself drawing from other traditions, as I am, do your best to go to the source. Engage with the origins, the historical context, and the intentions of the teachings and practices. Do so with humility and with respect. While mystic traditions, by definition, point to the unitive nature of ultimate reality, the differences between human beings and between their religions matter. So do all that you can to honor those differences. Third, if the Tree of Life teachings that I've shared with you speak to your heart, remember that I'm only an interloper and a novice at that, sincere but imperfect in my understanding, so please don't take my word for it. Go to the source. Fourth, there are many meditations and correspondences between these teachings and others of the mystic category. Whichever tradition you practice and have learned about and feel drawn to, practice them. Dedicate yourself to practice every day, even when it feels hard or boring. Because the more we practice, the more we immerse ourselves in the symbology and imagery and visceral experience of spiritual disciplines, the more readily they will surprise us with comfort and insight and courage when and where we most need that, even in a crowded subway or a traffic jam, and even when sheltering in place. As if that weren't enough promise and blessing, I offer this in closing. In Jewish tradition, during times of hardship and grief, the following blessing for comfort is offered. Hamakom yenachem otcha. In this blessing, makom, God as spaciousness, is called upon. Not the abstract God omnipotent, or the fear-inducing God sovereign, or even the God who is merciful, but the embracing and permeating God of right here and right now within us, creative potential. Hamakom yenachem otcha. May comfort and inspiration and courage come to us all as we each in our own way open to this sacred spaciousness already within and among us, no matter who or where we are. Peace be with you and through you. If you'd like to find out more about my Tending Spirit ministry, please look at tendingspirit.com or contact me at tendingspirit@gmail.com. Blessings.